and also learn about the window of tolerance and do a little bit of a self-assessment of how that might show up for you. And then we're also going to talk about stress, perfectionism, and self-compassion. And the last thing we're going to do together is that we are going to do a self-assessment of our wellness and talk about a self-care plan that you can take home with you. And I put a little bit note here about materials because I am going to have, when it comes to doing the self-evaluation about your wellness, it would be nice if you had a piece of paper, a notebook, or something that you can write on. And feel free to bring color pencils, markers, whatever you have on hand. And we're going to be using it to write. Okay, and so now I want to go over community agreements for today. I want to encourage everybody to use appropriate gender pronouns as stated, to use inclusive and respectful language. If there is something that I share that you disagree with, or somebody in the chat share something that you disagree with. We want to challenge the idea or the belief and not the person. And the last thing that we want to do is take care of yourself, camera on or off, participate as much as little as you want. It seems like my presentation cut again, so I'm gonna stop sharing just really quick, and I'm gonna try to do it again. Give me one quick second. Stop. And you should be able to see me, and I'm gonna try to share one more time. And hopefully this time it will work out. Okay, let's see if that's better. And if not, then I will just make sure that I go over everything, and then we'll make the PowerPoint available as well for later if you want to reference to anything that I spoke and that you couldn't see in the presentation. Okay, so now we're going to be together for a guided imagery, and I'm going to be putting a little bit of soft music in the back that you may or may not be able to hear. And what I want to invite you to do is, where you're seated, to find a comfortable position where your shoulders are relaxed, your back is straight. It's almost like a string is pulling you from your head and helping your spine support you, but also not to feel too stiff. If you feel comfortable, this would be a great time to close your eyes. If you do not feel comfortable, an alternative can be keeping a soft gaze in front of you, maybe in front of your computer, making sure that your chin is not too tucked in. And as you find that comfortable spot, I want to invite you to take a deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. One more time, in through your nose, out through your mouth. We're gonna do 2 more breaths, in through your nose, and out through your mouth. Allowing yourself now to find a comfortable rhythm of breathing in and out, where you find enough oxygen in your lungs, where you feel satisfied with every breath that you're taking. We're gonna begin with a quick body scan by noticing our heads. Notice if there's any tension that you're holding on your face, any tension on your forehead, your eyebrows, any tension on your cheeks, your nose, your mouth. Notice any tension in the area where your neck and your head connect, and maybe move your head side to side. Move to your shoulders, your upper back. And if there's any tension, guide your breath to that area. Breathing in relaxation, breathing out stress, breathing in patience, letting go of restlessness. Notice your chest, your stomach, your lower back. Notice the quality of your breath. Does it feel easy to breathe in and out? When was the last time that you took a moment to notice your breath? Notice your pelvis, your hips. Notice how the chair, the bed, the couch where you're sitting is holding you up. Notice if you've started slouching again. And try to get to a good, comfortable posture. Notice your legs and your feet. And as you enter this state of relaxation, in your mind's eye, imagine there's a beautiful field, an open field. There may be a creek running next to the field. There may be some flowers. Look around this empty field. Take off your shoes. Feel the ground or the grass under your feet. And the next thing you'll see is 3 balloons. And these 3 balloons, today, what they're going to let us do is let go of 3 things that are on your mind right now in this moment that might get in the way of you being present with us, to be present with yourself. Put the 1 thing, the 2nd thing, the 3rd thing that's on your mind inside each balloon. And now, let the balloons go up in the air. Give yourself permission to release the worries, the preoccupations, and allow yourself this time to feel relaxed, to give to yourself, to be present. And in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, wiggle your fingers and your toes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slowly open your eyes. And now that we're back together, on the chat box, if you feel comfortable, I'm gonna have these boxes pop up here and there to encourage participation. And as you kind of come back to join us and get ready for this session, for your mental health, for you, you are doing this for you today, right now, realizing that the better that you're with yourself, the better that you can be there for others. So what is your intention for today? What do you hope to take away with you? Denisha said that this was so relaxing. I am grateful to hear that you were able to connect and get some relaxation. So let us know in the chat. And what is your intention for today? What do you hope to take away with you when we're done with the session? I'm gonna give it like a few seconds and keep typing, and I will move forward. The first thing that we're gonna talk about today is stress and the window of tolerance. How do you define stress? On the chat box, again, if you feel comfortable to do so, how do you define stress? I'm gonna give you the definition, the professional definition, my own definition, but it's really important to understand for ourselves what does it mean, because one of the things about stress is that something that may be stressful to you might not be stressful at all to another person, and something that may be super relaxing to you, something that doesn't cause you any trouble, for another person, they might have a different response, right? So it's important before we start this conversation, how do we define stress? So from my part, stress is a feeling of emotional and physical tension. A lot of the times people talk about stress like it's a bad thing. Oh, I'm so stressed. And we mention it as if something that we want to get rid of, something that we don't want there. But as is, stress is just a feeling. It's a reaction that comes from a situation that maybe is causing frustration, anger. Our body is reacting to a challenge, a demand. And even good and happy things can bring stress. And the reality is that in short bursts, stress can be a positive thing. It can help us stay focused, energetic, and alert. But when stress lasts a long time, that is where we can start seeing some impact to our health, right? And so acute stress, short term. preparing for this presentation, right? Even though it's something I love doing, could potentially bring a level of stress that is both encouraging to get what I need to get done, but also it may cause some reactions for me, right? And so other way that you may feel acute stress could be when you're driving and you slam your brakes and like that moment that your heart is pounding, right? Then we have chronic stress. Chronic stress lasts for a longer period. You may have chronic stress if you're having money problems, if you're having relationship or family issues, if you're having trouble at work. Living under a pandemic, inevitably, as time goes by, we're moving from a place of being in acute stress, that's something that was happening very quickly and we had to adjust. And for some people, depending on the circumstances and the way that COVID-19 and the pandemic has affected them, some people may be entering chronic stress, right? The other thing about chronic stress is that once we start experiencing it, it can become our baseline. And you're going to see a couple of my funny gifs throughout the presentation, because this is some of us. We are drinking our cup of coffee saying that this is fine. And in the meanwhile, everything around us is burning, right? But because it has become the norm, it has become what we're used to, we can go on and just have our cup of coffee as if nothing is going on around us. So our stress and trauma responses for people, this is what happens when our body thinks it's under attack, right? So we have stress, stressful situation or traumatic situation happen to us, and our body goes into reaction. I need to react, I need to protect myself, I need to get out of whatever is going on. So there are 4 common responses to stress or trauma that most of us will have. Flight includes running or fleeing from the situation. And one of the things that people don't see as a flight response is the constant sense of being busy. If I keep myself busy, I am in flight from the thing that is stressful in front of me, and some in avoidance, right? I keep running away from it. Fight is driven by the belief that if we're powerful and in control, that then the situation that's bringing us the stress is not going to affect us. The freeze becomes when we feel incapable about that we can do anything about the situations in front of us. And so we not only freeze, but sometimes we go into a camouflage response where we just fade into the back and we just camouflage with whatever is going on. Don't make any noise, don't bring any fuss or attention. And this can lead to isolation, right? And the last one, which is one that a lot of people are not talking about yet, but is becoming very common for all of us mental health, people that work in mental health to talk about, is the fawning response, which is that we may seek safety by merging with the wishes and needs and the demands of the stressful situation, of the conflict, or even of our aggressor. If I fawn, right, like the idea of fawning kind of, to me, makes me think of becoming small, getting small and hiding. But fawning can also lead us into compliance, just complying into whatever is going on, and that way I will avoid having a repercussion, a negative repercussion or a consequence from the stressful situation. So having heard about trauma and stress responses, how do you respond to stress? Do you fight? Do you flight? Do you freeze? Or do you fawn? What do you think you do? Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. 4 of them. Things that are common stressors, right? Could be personal things. It could be an illness. It could be the end of a relationship. It could be financial stability. Could be our family, marriage, right? The preparation for a wedding can be very stressful. The ending of a marriage can be very stressful. Having children, having even these positive changes into our lives can create a level of stress. Work, new job, a new boss, being unemployed, losing our job. It could be environmental. A war, a natural disaster, a pandemic, right? Something that we are experiencing that we had never experienced before. And a common stressor also could be socio-political. We are more and more hearing people talking about race-based stress, right? The impact that it has to see violence that is race-based on TV, reading it on the news. Anti-sentiments, anti-immigration. If you're an immigrant, your responses to the stress that's causing may be higher for you from another person. So I think it's really important to think also that stressors don't come in just like one at a time, right? So just because you're having a personal stress, okay, so this other part is not going to affect you. The reality is that, kind of like my little picture here, is that many of us, when we encounter our stress, we end up encountering a variety of different levels of stress at the same time, and that can make things a lot harder. So I want to talk next about the difference between stress and anxiety, because like I said earlier, stress by itself necessarily is not a bad thing. It can even be a good thing, right? So the stress, basically put, is a response to a threat or a situation. It's temporary, versus anxiety is a reaction to stress. I'm feeling anxious because of the stressful situation that I'm going through. And so like in this picture up here, stress in this example is caused by this little bee pesking you, right? So you can think about stress as those like pesky things around you that are bothering you. When it starts getting a little bit concerning is when the anxiety starts showing up and it continues even after the stressor has been gone. And so on this next slide, I have a little bit of a list of some of the things that you could be looking for yourself about maybe asking, should I speak to somebody? Should I talk to my doctor about what's going on with me, right? So for people that have prolonged exposure to a stress, you might start seeing gastrointestinal issues, forgetfulness, aches and pains, headaches, lack of focus. And you'll notice that some of the things can be both in the stress category as well as the anxiety category. And so the difference, again, is that stress is based on a situational, this is happening, and so therefore now I'm having stomach issues. This is happening and I'm feeling really stiff and really tired. This is happening and I'm having trouble sleeping, or I'm sleeping too much. The stressor is gone, so those symptoms also leave. Maybe not as fast as you imagine that they would be gone, but they would eventually leave. When it comes to anxiety, is when the stressors leave and these feelings stay. And the key part here is like this 6 months, when this excessive anxiety, this feelings of panic, dizziness, rapid breathing, racing heart, difficulties controlling the worry, when these things start becoming the norm for everyday functioning, I would say that it's a time to speak to somebody. The other thing about unmanaged stress is that it may not only for some people lead to anxiety, but it could also lead for other people for depression when it starts becoming chronic stress. So very important that you're noticing and keeping track to see if this is getting better or worse for you. How are you doing? Oh, I'm good. I'm carrying a big ball of stress. I'm doing fine. The stress is crushing us down, and the stress many times even just fully crushes us out, and we still have this desire to show up to the world as we are doing okay. And this becomes problematic for so many people, because what can happen is that you may not realize really how well or how you're not doing well until you're very deep in, right? And so what would happen if all of us started checking in with ourselves and started talking and putting names to the emotions that we're feeling around the stress that we're feeling? Potentially, that would mean that our stress maybe becomes just a smaller burden to carry, and if we are not carrying it at once until it crushes us down, right? So self-assessment, how well do you think you are managing your stress? Are you a person that when a stress comes, you're able to identify, oh man, like this is heavy, this is a lot for me, but I practice some self-care, I lean into my community, people are my support, and then the stress, although it's not gone, is not impacting my life? Or am I a person that when stressful situation comes, everything else starts falling apart, right? So those are some ways that we can kind of determine, am I doing a good job managing my stress? And so am I on the low stress zone, or am I more on the high stress zone, right? And I see that somebody on the chat said that they're doing okay with lots of help from the spouse. And that's really, really important, right? That we identify people in our lives who are our support system, so that when we are feeling ourselves that the stress is starting to become unmanageable, sometimes anxiety is coming up, you know, a partner potentially could say, hey, I've noticed that the last 3 nights you haven't been sleeping really well. You've been tossing and turning a lot more. You've been grinding your teeth at night, right? So we can also lean in the people of support in our lives to kind of help us identify whether or not our stress feels under control, or maybe it's starting to get to that place that maybe it's starting to become chronic and worrisome, and that would be an indication of talking to somebody. So there's a couple of people saying that lately it's been hard to manage stress, right? And or that for other people, some days might be better than others. And also somebody mentioned that by walking and listening to music, that's something that helps them deal with their stress. And so it's very important to and to think about stress also under the current context that we're in, right? We are talking about how to manage our wellness and distance learning. And the reason that we framed it in this way, because we have to recognize that whether or not you're a tech savvy person, whether or not you have been a pioneer with Zoom, the situation that we're all in globally, right, as a country, as a nation, not only because of COVID, but also racial injustice, different things are going on, that your stress and even the things that you were able to do in the past to manage your stress may not be working as much or to the same degree that they did before. So a recap, stress is not a bad thing. It's an alert system from the body. This is how we respond to pressures, responsibilities, and threats, whether they're real or perceived. We put the label on it, whether it's positive or negative. Stress at itself is neither. Our perception of the stimulus can make something that is stressful more stressful. And some events that may, and this is important because I think some people, this is where we open the compassion for others, that something might not feel one way for us, but might feel for our students very differently, might feel for the families that we work with very differently, might feel differently to our partners, right? So no two people experience stress the same way. So checking in with them about how they're handling it from their end, and that prolonged stress may have long-term health outcomes. And so it is important that if you're noticing that your stress is starting to have impact in your body, that you consider talking to somebody, whether it's a therapist or whether it's even your primary care doctor, right? And just because you carry it well doesn't mean that it's not heavy. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is the window of tolerance, right? And so in the window of tolerance, I don't know how many of you are familiar with what the window of tolerance is, but I really, really like using it to talk about why for some people situations may not feel as strenuous. So the window of tolerance, what it is this space for all of us where we can tolerate a situation. We can tolerate work stress. We can tolerate anything that's coming with us. But it comes a point where this window starts shrinking, and the things that used to be able to fit in there without bothering you so much, they don't fit anymore. And so as this window shrinks, you start having reactions to them. For some people, it may be hyperarousal, kind of like the volcano right here, right? I am stressed and I cannot take it anymore, so I feel like I'm going to explode. For other people, they go more into a hypoarousal. I am stressed and I'm just shutting down. By the minute, I'm shutting down. So the window of tolerance helps us identify when we're starting to lose that space where we can function in our day-to-day activities and still have stress, right? And the better that we are able to identify what that window of tolerance feels like for us, and it may be situational, that you may have more of a threshold to hold more in certain circumstances than in others. It would help you also develop a plan of what to do when you're starting to feel the window shrinking, right? So when you're hyper-aroused, I think another thing to mention is that people become rigid. They may become rigid. They may become obsessive compulsive. They may overeat or undereat, restrict themselves from food. Addictions may be flared up. They may become more impulsive, right? So when we are hyper aroused, I like to think about it as like when we are being expressive outwardly at times, right? And the causes for a window of tolerance can be around fear, right? Unconscious thoughts that are triggering, this is happening, and so I think I was tolerating this, but now I'm afraid. I'm afraid of what's going to happen, and then it starts taking over, and boom, can come an explosion. or for people that have experienced trauma in the past. If you're a person that has experienced trauma, your window of tolerance may be smaller, or it may be more circumstantial, right? That if a situation that is showing up relates to a traumatic experience you've had in the past, you are likely to be able to shrink your window of tolerance a lot more quicker. The hyperaroused has to do with the fight or flight response, right? I am on. I am ready to battle whatever is coming, or I am going to run away, right? It's that reaction. When we're coming to talk about the hyperarousal, right? It might start feeling more like, I hear it from people, it's like, I'm feeling depressed. I'm not feeling myself. I may feel a little bit mopey. I may feel a little bit more disconnected. I'm not sure what's going on. Kind of like that feeling of autopilot, right? Or not being able to talk about what's going on. You may not, just kind of like that feeling of not being present. So after hearing about the window of tolerance, what do you think is your reaction? Your window of tolerance is shrinking. Do you tend to become more hyper-aroused or more hypo-aroused? And for some people, it can be a little bit of both. It can be circumstantial, but I tend to believe that most of us have a leaning. Are we more of a hyper-aroused state or a hypo-aroused state when we're under stress? So we have somebody hypo-aroused, definitely hypo-aroused, going autopilot. That's a great way to determine too. It's like, do you kind of like go through your day and then you get to your day and you're like, what did I even do, right? Hyper-aroused. Okay, great. Well, thank you for sharing. So on the next slide, what I have is some activities that you could use depending on your style, if it is more of a hypo or a hyper, right? So if you are in a hyper, if you're in that red, what you can try, for example, is diaphragmatic breathing. If you're angry, if you're having an anger reaction, if you want to just flee, run away from the situation, and you take a deep breath into your belly, and you take another one, and you take another one, chances are that you'll physically start feeling your window of tolerance opening up again, right? Like that emotion that you were experiencing really heightened, it starts lowering. My wife was laughing when I was showing her the presentation. I said, drinking from a straw, because she thought it was really funny to think of drinking from a straw could be something helpful. And I asked her, well, have you ever been angry and drank from a straw? Like, what would that feel like, right? And so there's this, they kind of can feel silly, but it is in the not a normal, quote unquote, reaction to or doing something opposite than what we're feeling that can help us decrease that arousal, right? And in the case that you're a person that tends to, somebody laughed about, like, I'm telling you, next time that you're angry, try to drink from a straw and think of this conversation, and you'll see that your anger will subside. So on the other end, if you're a person that tends to go more on the lower, right, like you shut down, you go on autopilot, anything that stimulates the senses. One of the things that I have, for example, is my essential oil roller, right? Right? So if I'm feeling that and I'll smell it. I have a little bit of lavender here, and I think I have geranium too. So different things like that, smelling, chewing crunchy food, right? Getting your senses awakened again, sitting on a rocking chair, getting a weighted blanket, finger painting, right? Blowing bubbles. There are things that can get you arousal back up into your window of tolerance. So from this list, and I'll put it again, what is one thing that now that you are kind of have identified that you're either hyper aroused or hypo aroused, what is one thing from the list here that you might want to try when you feel that your window of tolerance is shrinking? Let's see, I'll give you like a minute so that you can look it over. Finger painting sounds nice. And something silly, right? And something probably you wouldn't do all the time. The straw. Okay. So like, again, like I said, this will be available to you after, so you'll be able to have access to this list and you can look it over And depending on how you're feeling, this is a list that you can go to and find some ideas. So, okay, we've been together for about 40 minutes now, and we've been talking about stress, which sometimes talking about stress can make you feel more stressed, right? So check in with your body, unclench your jaw, let your shoulders drop, relax your hands, take a deep breath, and allow yourself to release some tension. This is a body check-in. We're about halfway done, so just kind of want to get us connected again. All right. And so the next thing that we're going to be talking about is stress, perfectionism, and self-compassion. And I have a video from two of my favorite people in the world, Oprah and Brene Brown. So if you've seen it before, fantastic. I've seen it before, and I watched it 3 times as I was preparing for this because some of the things resonated, even though I've heard it before. So I'm going to play it and stay with us. Let me know if you can hear it. No, I can't hear it. That was my fear, that it wasn't going to be able to be heard. I am so sorry. Let me see if it's something I'm doing here with my audio. I will try. And if not, then I'll leave the, share computer audio. Is that what I do? Okay.
Is your audio on, Adriana?
I am trying. I thought it was. I thought that I had left it on, but I might have not. So I'll try it. And if not, then I'll leave the video and I'll just share the quote. Okay. Okay. I think I might have resolved it. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to try to start it again. What about now?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, bummer. No.
The secret. When perfectionism is driving, shame is always riding shotgun. And fear is the annoying.
Okay, let me see if I can restart it because it's really good. So here we go.
Let's talk about some of the most common examples of armor. You were talking about the armor that we put on to protect ourselves.
Yeah, I think the big 3 are perfectionism, numbing, foreboding, joy. And there's also cynicism, cool, and being critical. So let's look at them. Perfectionism. How many of you struggle with perfectionism a little bit? Okay, so my favorite story is that someone sent me an email one time that said, hey, I know you have a book on shame, not so interested in that, but if you ever write on perfectionism, I can't wait. So here's the secret. When perfectionism is driving, shame is always riding shotgun. And fear is the annoying backseat driver.
Say it again.
When perfectionism is driving, shame is always riding shotgun. We struggle with perfectionism in areas where we feel most vulnerable to shame. Does that make sense? So we're all comfortable saying, yeah, I'm a little perfectionistic, which is code for like I do things really well. But I'm not comfortable saying I have shame. Perfectionism, what is that? I call it the 20-ton shield. Here's what perfectionism really is. It's a way of thinking that says this: if I look perfect, live perfect, work perfect, I can avoid or minimize criticism, blame, and ridicule.
Whoa, that's good.
All perfectionism is the 20-ton shield that we carry around hoping that it'll keep us from being hurt. When in truth, what it does is it keeps us from being seen. And so we had a great talk about what's the difference between perfectionism.
Yes, because somebody on my staff had the nerve to tell me that I was a perfectionist. And I absolutely denied that. And you stood by me. Thank you very much. Because I'm not a perfectionist. I'm a person who strives for excellence and requires excellence. There is a difference. Is there not?
There is a difference. Here's the difference. Because sometimes I'm a healthy striver. And sometimes I'm a perfectionist. It depends on if I've got a worthiness crunch going on. So healthy striving is internally focused. It's I want to do this and be the best I can be. Perfectionism is not about what I want. Perfectionism is exactly what will people think.
Yes.
So how many of you are driven by what will people think? So I'll give you a great example. So while we're taping these, my son's first day at school. And so, I'll be home tomorrow, right? It's not a big deal, but it's what will people think?
Is he in the first grade?
Second.
Second. Okay.
So he is monogrammed from toe to toe. His haircut, everything's laid out. His lunch will have some kind of vegetable fruit ratio that's perfect. Because I am struggling a little bit.
Because you're here with me and not.
And what will people think?
What will people think? They're going to think, there she is up there with Oprah.
Talking about how to be a good parent.
How to be a good parent.
Boots.
Yes, and her fancy boots. Yeah.
Right. But so I don't think, so the thing is, you can't ever do anything brave if you're wearing the straitjacket of what will people think.
Okay, so when perfectionism is driving us, shame is riding shotgun, and fear is that annoying backseat driver. So how does stress and perfectionism come together? Right? That's the question. And so now that you have your paper, and this one you don't have to share on the chat, only if you want to, but I want to give you like a minute, because I really think that it is such a good frame to think about perfectionism, shame, and fear, and add on to that how it can create stress, right? So take a minute to write, and if you feel comfortable, you can do it on the chat, but maybe this could be more of a personal writing prompt. How are perfectionism, shame, and fear impacting you and potentially bringing more stress to your life? Give you a minute. Okay, wrapping up your thoughts, and you can keep writing.
Hi, everyone. I think we're having some technical difficulties. I just want to make sure. I'm not sure if Adriana was having a.
I'm here. I don't know what happened.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened either. I think that, did you stop sharing your screen? Because we're not seeing it.
No, I didn't move anything. Let me see. Let me go back to it and share it again, because I don't know what happened. So let me just stop my video in case that's eating anything up, and I'll reshare my screen, but you can hear me. Okay, so that's all that matters.
Okay, we're good. Okay. We're good. Thank you.
Perfect. Sorry about that. So so this is great. So somebody said, I'm striving to maintain the basics. Perfection is far. And that is so real, Crystal, so real. But you know what's really interesting that has happened, especially right now with COVID, right? That a lot of us may be more exposed with some of the folks who do go into this flight or fight response to their stress, and who may be on social media sharing about how they are handling everything so wonderfully, right? And so this may be causing, for many of us, additional stress, even that not only maybe I'm not even trying for perfection, I'm trying to maintain the basics, and I still feel like I'm struggling, right? So for many people, this is where shame and fear start showing up. And so what is the sort of like antidote for shame, fear, perfectionism, for these trauma responses, these stress responses of fight and flight? And this is where self-compassion comes in. Self-compassion is the key to a happy life, right? Self-compassion entails being warm and understanding towards yourself, and rather than ignoring our pain, or rather than self-flagellating ourselves with self-criticism, we allow ourselves and offer ourselves that self-kindness. I care about myself in the way that I care about everybody else, and those who surround me, those that I may know and those that I may not know. I also recognize my humanity, recognize the humanity, and that this is a moment that I am going through with others as well. And then the third part is that it allows us, when we are in self-compassion, it allows us to remain mindful, and it allows us to be present. And at times, one of the explanations that I like about mindfulness, we think about mindfulness that is breathing and is being in guided imagery, but mindfulness, simply stated, acknowledges our suffering without exaggerating it. It allows it to be just what it is without it becoming something bigger. So, so this is the antidote to those feelings of shame, those feelings of fear, those feelings of I'm not good enough. Self-compassion. So how can perfectionism be potentially hurting you? It can be causing more stress. It can increase your anxiety. It can bring higher levels of burnout. It can make you have problems delegating. You know, all of us that think that we are super people, and we don't want to delegate, we don't want to share responsibilities with others, because the fear is that then people would know that I'm struggling. We may become overly critical, overly judgmental. We might tend to micromanage and not let go as much. We may overwork, and at the end, be less productive. Is my screen sharing?
Yeah, your screen sharing, your video was just off, so I just wanted to,
okay,
there you go.
There we go. Technology, very stressful. So the quote that I like to use when I think about perfectionism for me is this: for some reason, we're truly convinced that if we criticize ourselves, the criticism will lead to change, that if we're harsh, we will end up being kind, that if we shame ourselves, we will end up loving ourselves, right? Like we start doing these things in hopes to get the opposite result. But the reality is that it's never been true, not for a moment, that shame leads to love, that only love leads to love. And when we show self-compassion to ourselves, we are showing love to ourselves. And it's very important that in those moments where stress is coming in, where then the shame of I am not handling this properly, I'm not doing it the right way, I am not good enough comes up, that we give ourselves a little bit of self-love, a little bit of self-compassion, that we allow ourselves to have humanity, to be in it with other people. And one of the things that somebody in the comments said is that, you know, the snowballing of it, right? And so when we offer ourselves self-compassion, it's a way to stop that snowballing from continuing to grow, and to say, wait a minute, I'm doing the best that I can. I am offering myself this moment to accept that even when things are not going as great as I would want them to be, that I am doing the best that I can, right? And like Crystal said on the chat, to be still and to take a deep breath. So we're gonna move now to talk, we've talked about stress, we've talked about the window of tolerance, we've talked about perfectionism and how that can impact some of us. So now I want to talk about wellness, right? Like that's the next step that we're going to talk. And then this is where I hope to leave you with a good plan to take with you past this conversation that we're having and something tangible. So let's start by thinking about what is wellness. What comes to your mind when you think about wellness? And let's see if anybody wants to share. Practical tips, tools, and techniques. Yes, that is where we're going next. Awesome. Okay, so let's think about wellness. Wellness is a bunch of things. Happiness, healthy alternatives. Wellness is laughter, is being playful, is feeling safe, is being able to express your feelings, is being able to have a lifestyle that promotes us feeling well, right? Is balance. And this can be really, really hard to feel well when there could be so much around us, right, that is impacting us. That the things that we can control, maybe they feel that they're manageable, but then we add on the layer of everything that is outside too, right? So wellness is an active, lifelong process of becoming aware of the choices that you're making and the decisions that you're making. And how do these choices help you get to a more balanced and fulfilling life? You can't pour from an empty cup, right? We hear it in the airplane always. You put on your mask first, you go help somebody else. And this is where it comes so important when we're talking about distance learning and everything that all of us as educators, as parents, as partners, as spouses, as adult children, we may be experiencing, right? That we are out there giving, and we're not taking the time to pour back into our cup. And so we run into the danger of getting to a place where we won't have anything to give. And so everyone's optimal wellness, just like stress, something that may be stressful to you is not stressful to somebody else. In the case of wellness, is that the way that you're going to fulfill your needs might be very different than another person fulfills their needs, right? And so my little cartoons, so this is me taking care of my pets, my friends, my significant other, but myself and the garbage, right? So let's think about, am I offering myself the same amount of love, the same amount of care that I am offering everybody else in my life? Sometimes we are not. Sometimes we're last on the list. Many, many times we are last on the list. So we're going to be doing an activity together that is called the Wellness Wheel. And wellness is like a wheel. Within the wellness wheel, each wedge represents a dimension of health. And the more balanced that you are in each area, the more that your wheel can roll without feeling those bumps in the road. If you're unbalanced, the wheel becomes a little bit more dysfunctional. And so it's the difference between thriving and surviving. So you'll see here, and on my next slide, that the wellness wheel has this outer circle, which would be like my cup is full in each area. Then we have a middle circle that's like my cup is not doing so well. And then we have a little circle. It's like, I definitely need to work on this area. So with your artistic skills, I'm going to put a little bit of music and I'm going to give us 3 minutes. I'll time it. And even if you don't make it into a pie, you can make it into a circle. And think about the different areas of your wellness. There's 8 recommended here: intellectual health, emotional and mental health, occupational health, physical health, social health, spiritual health, environmental health, and financial health. And this is going to serve as a little bit of a self-assessment of how you are doing. Okay, I'm going to put a little bit of music in the background and get on to working, and I will give you a time check in 3 minutes. And just like in the previous slide, if you want to do it with the wheel, you will just shade in, and then it will give you an idea of where your wellness wheel might need some improvement, a little bit of push. about a minute and a half left. Take your time. Somebody is already commenting. Yeah, and feel free to comment on the chat, like what's coming up for you. I think I need a little bit of each category. It's okay, like I think we all do, right? And then we might be surprised that in some areas maybe we're doing better than others. Okay, we have about 35 seconds left. So if you are done, for those folks that are kind of getting done, the writing prompt with this activity is write down 1 or 2 factors that are positively and or negatively impacting each of the dimensions. Yes, you can fill in the wheel, and you can, yes, these are the areas too where our privilege may be coming across, right? And that we might not be experiencing the same hardships than other people are. And yes, Anisha, you can fill in the wheel. Okay, so time is up. And so now, if you didn't make the wheel and you just did a little bit of thinking about each area, this is where the writing prompt will come in to get you into even more thought about what are the factors that are impacting you in each of the areas. And if you feel comfortable in the chat, please share, like, what are some of the things that are impacting you both positively or negatively. And the reason that if you feel comfortable to do so, this will be a great area to do, because it might give ideas to other people about what are the things that are positively impacting you. And others also may see their experience reflected even in the areas that are negatively impacting you. Okay, I'm gonna give it 30 seconds to see if anybody shares anything. Time. Okay. All right, so this activity builds into kind of 3 steps. The first one is where we assess. The second one is where we think about the positive and the negative factors that are going on that are affecting each of the dimensions. And the third part is the self-care plan, okay? And so I always tell, I'm a plant mom. I have a lot of plants in my house. And one of the things that I've learned from my plants is that water and sunlight are necessary in my life. And so we're all basically houseplants with complicated emotions. And so this is where self-care comes in, right? I want to invite you to pick 3 domains. We're going to have to talk about plants, Roxana, after this then, because I love my plants. It's definitely my self-care. Yes. And so I want to invite you to pick 3 domains from your wellness wheel that you feel you'd like to pour some more intentional efforts into your self-care. And that doesn't mean that it has to be the ones that are the lowest. Sometimes it could be one that you already are like medium. And by creating a self-care plan, you're going to avoid getting yourself deeper into the trenches. Or it could be somewhere where you really are struggling and you want to leave today's session with some actionable items that you can kind of start following, okay? So take 3 things that you want to work on, things that you can do that feel tangible and manageable. And this, I would encourage you to not make it, yes, I can remind you of the categories. I'll go back to it, to the wellness check-in. And I want to just kind of preface this shouldn't be something that brings stress to your life, right? Like, this should be a part where there's some actionable things that you feel you can manage, that they feel they make sense, and that they are not going to trigger your perfectionism, that you're going to leave this session with this action plan that needs to be completed by this date, on this time, unless that's your style, which is okay. But inviting you to think about, this is something flexible, something that you can also do on your own. Okay, so these are the categories, and then I'll take you back to the self-care plan, and then I'm going to give you 3 more minutes to think about your self-care plan. And the reason that we're doing it in session is because I've noticed that when I leave this for homework to do after the sessions, we jump back into our day-to-day. So since you're here, since we're together, I want to give you time to do it here, okay? So 3 minutes, and you are going to hear the timer. And in the meanwhile, enjoy a little bit of music. Also, this will be a great time to identify support people, because as a community, right, and our community can be our home, could be our friends, they may be people that are key to getting your self-care plan going. So if you identify a couple of people, this is a great place to list them as well. And thank you, Crystal. This is my favorite playlist, my lo-fi beats. I can concentrate with them and kind of just chill through my day and do a lot of work. Okay, so we have about 1.5 minutes left to work on our self-care plan. Yes, we are going to be attaching the PowerPoint as well as the self-care plan and the wellness wheel to the documents with the presentation. They should be there already, but if they're not, we'll attach them, and you can do this in your own time. 1 more minute. I think that's a great reminder, Crystal, to the self-care plan, to include even self-compassion, right? To think about ourselves and the things that we need to do, even that may feel like must-dos, because self-care isn't always fun. Self-care sometimes means doing the hard things that we've been avoiding, that we don't want to do. And so how do we allow self-compassion to come in here? Okay, we have 20 seconds. Okay, let's get that together. And so the thing that I also want to say here, because many of us are educators, many of us are parents, these are activities that you can do with students. You would be surprised. I have done wellness wheels and self-care plans with kindergartners, right? When they might not be thinking about their financial health or things like that, but you can help them think about the areas that they feel that they need a little bit of help, right? And then creating self-care plans with them. I do these activities with students all the time. I currently serve working with middle schoolers, and this is one of my staple activities. Creating self-care plans with kids, creating self-care plans with our family members, creating a family self-care plan. These things, I really, really encourage you to use it with students. And yes, go Sex City. Okay, and so now that we're together, the last thing that I want to say, kind of as we start wrapping up, is don't wait for everything to be perfect before you decide to enjoy your life. We were talking about stress, which inevitably makes you think about stress. We were thinking about our wellness wheel and recognize some areas where we might need some help. But the sense that I want to leave you with is that everything doesn't need to be working perfect for you to find joy, to find love, to find self-compassion within yourself. And so don't wait, right? Utilize this as flags of areas where you need to pour a little bit more into, but don't let yourself get caught up in the fact that you are not doing it, or that you are missing, or that you somehow are responsible for it, you don't have, to let yourself enjoy. And with that, I want to thank you for joining me and being with me. And we are going to be opening up for some Q&As. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we will go into our Q&A section.
Great. Thank you so much, Adriana. That was an awesome interactive discussion. I don't want to say presentation because I felt that we were thinking through, you know, the course of the different points you were bringing up, really taking this as a time of reflection. I know you really set the tone at the beginning with the, you know, with the little activity. I think that also relaxed me while I'm over here as well. So again, I see that there's a lot of, you know, thank yous coming through the chat box. We do have plenty of time for questions. I do want to open that up, whether it's if you'd all been putting, I'm not seeing any just yet on our Hoova platform, but also feel free to put that through on the Zoom chats. I know I do want to go in the question that you did pose on the Hoova platform, Adriana. You did ask folks what can they do to identify as the biggest barrier in getting of how to take care of your mental health right now. And so I'll just share some of those comments that were added in during the course of the presentation. And so Mariah shared that there was difficulties with work and life balance. Rochelle said that health coverage and motivation. Margarita shared supervisors increased expectations despite remote working. Rebecca mentioned low energy. Crystal mentioned making time. I don't know if you have any thoughts on those, you know, those reflections that folks shared.
I think that they're all really accurate, right? I think that very strangely, I even myself have felt it, that as we are working from home, many of us still have had the luxury of doing that. As the school year also has started, right? The pressures kind of came in as a bucket of cold water, because I know that I've discussed this with a couple of my educator friends, that many of us feel like we're first-time educators this time around. You know, as a parent, you might feel like you're sending your kid to kindergarten again, because you're having to do all these new things, exploring how to manage your time. You know, how do you deal with you being on Zoom while your kid may be on Zoom, or your parent calling you that their Zoom is broken and their internet, you can't get in, right? And then finding time still for yourself. These are very, very real concerns. I think one of the, in terms of also talking to your supervisors, right? This is one of the conversations that I've been having with my own staff, when I've noticed, like, hey, like things are, so if you're in a position where you're a supervisor or a supervisee, right? If you're a supervisor, are you checking in with your staff? Are you not prying into what their personal situation is, but are you checking in? Like, how are they handling, right, the balance between working from home? Some people might not have I think somebody in the comments earlier had mentioned, for example, your privilege, right? I may have the privilege of living in a large enough home where I can have separation for where my office is, where my wife is working from, and close my door. Some families might not have that luxury of having spaces where you can separate, right? And multiple things happening through the day. And so it's really important that as a supervisor that we are checking in with our staff and that we are talking. I understand that as supervisors, we also are having the pressures that outcomes, right, are being asked of us from our own supervisors. And so it's like, how do we bring in the self-compassion to ourselves and also the compassion to others? And those ones are especially like in our teams, right? And if you're a person that has a supervisor that is having a difficult time with creating that flexibility or allowing that room, you know, to the degree that you can and that you feel comfortable talking to them about the difficulties that you're having, because one of the things that I always, when I am supervising interns, staff, that I always say, if I don't know what's going on with you, and this doesn't mean that I have to know every single thing that's happening in your life, but if I don't have an idea of the challenges that you're having, my expectations are going to be running based on what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing, even my own personal circumstances, right? So creating the space to talk about the areas where you're struggling, because right now, most of us are struggling in one way or another. The circumstances are not what we are accustomed to. They are going for a prolonged amount of time. I think that has like another part that we have not even realized how this is impacting our psyche. The knowing that there is this huge unknown that many of us are still, especially working in the schools, right, that we might not know when we're gonna go back in person. Are we going back in person? If you're a person that has comorbidities or illnesses that put you at risk, the idea of coming back to work, right, the stress that that creates. So it's really important that as much as you can, that you encourage yourself and others to have honest conversations. I think they're very vital right now, and the hope would be that you know, if I start functioning in the world with a little bit more self-compassion, then others will also start showing self-compassion to one another and to themselves. And then one of the other points that was made about finding the time, right? So I want to thank you all for joining us today and for coming in. I always find that it's like this lovely group of people that come to this type of sessions are the people that realize I need something and I might not quite be able to put my finger into what I'm missing. So my hope is that today, giving yourself this time to think about yourself, about your wellness, to think about you can't pour from an empty cup, to think about my mask needs to go on first, even if that feels very counterintuitive to my values, right? Sometimes cultural values are that we're all in it together. So this idea of self-care can feel really foreign. And so it's like, self-care also includes community care, right? But it starts with the self and then it expands. And so the more that you can find the time, that you can make the space to take care of you, then even the way that you can model to others to take care of themselves as well. How can we breach?
Yeah, I can read it for you. How can we breach? So this is asked by Rebecca, and she asked, how can we breach the topic of mental health, mindfulness with someone who might not be familiar with it?
Yes. And I'm gonna say it in there, not only familiar, but a lot of the times this stuff has stigma, right? The sitting down and meditating and being in this like chill beach, I'm just gonna relax. It can feel really odd at the beginning. I am a huge mindfulness, like this is what I'm known for. I love doing it. 10 years ago, your girl was not sitting down meditating at all. I mean, like, I would have probably laughed if you would have told me 10 years ago that I would be like a Zen, you know, like, oh, I like to be like mindful and like, and like, let me slow down and show some self-compassion, because it is, all of us have this moment of awakening where for me it happened because my mental health deteriorated, right? And I was like, how can I be a helper who's not taking care of their mental health? Like, how can I be out there serving students, serving communities, serving clients, and not taking care of myself? So we just kind of want to say that, yes, you are going to find a lot of people in your community, maybe, and even in your family and your job that have walls against talking about mindfulness, against talking about mental health. And the biggest thing that I'm going to say, and this is, I think I said it at the beginning, I don't teach things that you go do unto others. I teach things that you got to practice for yourself. And the hope would be that as you practice, it's almost like a ripple effect, that the more that you practice, the more that you get yourself in this place where you are well, others will be able to see it, and they potentially will be encouraged to do the things that they see you practicing and they see you having positive outcomes about. And so the other thing is that, for example, there is apps right now with kids. For example, kids do mindfulness. I teach mindfulness to little ones, to middle school ones, to high school ones. So kids enjoy talking about mindfulness and about mental health. And so start taking care of yourself, start modeling for others, and and talk about it, without fear, without worry. I take care of my mental health. I meditate. I'm a plant mom. I do, whatever it is that you do that makes you feel well, share it with others. The more authentically you show up to the world, I'm a big believer that it gives permission to others to be authentic as well.
Adriana, I had a question, and this is just more related to your position at Sac City, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about maybe some things that you're seeing right now just due to distance learning, specifically with the mental health of the youth that you're working with, or some challenges that you're facing. What you're doing to overcome those.
Oh man, that is a big question, because just today, right before coming into sharing space with you all, I was in a meeting with my team in my school where we were talking about outreach, right, to families, to students, to kids, because I am coming in from a place of like, I am a staff at a school. And I have this really amazing opportunity that I'm not a teacher, I'm not an administrator, I'm literally a helper. Like, that is how kids talk about me in my school, right? Like, Ms. Rodriguez is a helper. Whatever you need help, like, kids will drag one another and just say, just talk to her about whatever, right? And right now with distance learning, the biggest barrier is that I don't have kids coming to me and just saying, I need help with something. And so one of the biggest barriers really has been the stigma that lies with a lot of the adults of the kids that I need to get in touch with to work with, because they may have a different opinion or a different feeling about what's going on with their student, right? And so one of this is where stigma and the barriers of mental health can really are starting to show up for us, that we're not having as much access to kids as we're used to. At my particular school, we are hosting groups kind of like this one, where we are available twice a week for drop-in groups over Zoom, and we're doing activities, we're doing mindfulness, we're listening to music, so creating community in this virtual space. And kids are being ambassadors for me. The challenge is every group that happens is like, can you bring a friend, right? And so I'm asking kiddos to bring other kids, because one of the biggest referral sources to my services is from other kids being worried about their friends. And so, especially in the middle school age where I'm working in right now, kids, when they feel empowered, when they have a better understanding of mental health, when we all have a better understanding of mental health, you may be more encouraged to grab somebody's hand and say, I'm going to drag you to the person that can help you, because I don't know what to do, right? And normalizing that it's okay if you don't know what to do. If you're a teacher, if you're a parent, and you don't know what to do, many of our schools might not have a person like me on site, but there may be somebody at your district level. So finding out what resources are available so that you can connect proactively. We don't want to wait until somebody is really, really struggling to offer them help. So that's kind of what I am seeing from my end.
Thanks, Adriana. I do see a comment from Dario, and he shares that I feel like with this topic, probably relating to what we were talking to a little bit ago, you really have to embrace it to really advocate for your students. It doesn't seem like it's something that you can fake it till you make it. It's been my experience that those staff struggle to implement it well.
Yep. And I would agree with that. And the biggest struggle with it is that we as adults have a hard time finding time to practice these things and practice them to fidelity. And then also, this is not a fast track. This is not a cure, right? When you're talking about learning mindfulness skills, when you're talking about learning to take care of your mental health, it may take time. And we as adults tend to be very impatient, right? And I try meditating 3 times. I hear it all the time. It's like, this is the first time with you that I've been able to sit down and do a meditation. I've been able to do a guided imagery. And I'm grateful that I was able to kind of show like a different experience for some people. But I find that adults, one of the biggest barriers is that they're too impatient to try it again when it doesn't feel well. Not for mindfulness and sitting down and breathing, it's not going to be for everybody. But do you need to do more of an active mindfulness? Are you more of a person that journals? Are you more of a person that likes to engage physically, to be present with yourself, right? So you also have to find the right flavor of mental health care and wellness that is right for you. And that's why I really love the wellness wheel, because it kind of visually allows you to see some of the areas in a more clear way. You may be thinking that you are struggling, say, financially, but then once you put it on paper, it may actually convey you to question, well, how can I then do something about this, right? So doing the wellness wheel with yourself, doing it every few months, doing it with other people in your family, is a great place to start talking about mental health and how you're doing.
Let's see, there's another question that was added on, and how do we address mental health stigma? I know that's probably going to be a tough one, but
that is a big one. And what I would say is, you being here, you are addressing mental health stigma, right? You becoming an ambassador. I love this idea of becoming ambassadors of mental health and wellness for ourselves, right? By our own practice, then we start showing to others. And the biggest thing about mental health stigma is this idea that mental health needs to be tucked behind the closet, right? In Spanish, for example, we have the phrase, los trapitos sucios se lavan en la casa, right? Your dirty laundry is washed at home. You shouldn't be airing it. You shouldn't be talking about it. So when we are hearing about mental health stigma, just like when we're hearing about racial injustices, right? Like, are we fierce, loud advocates for how things should be, right? Not being racist is not enough. We want to be anti-racist. Not having mental health stigma for ourselves is not the only thing we want to do. We want to do it outwardly as well. We want to talk about what are the barriers. And so the biggest way to address mental health is by getting comfortable talking about ourselves. And then, you know, how many people talk about being in therapy? I talk about being in therapy, right? And some people are like, but you're a therapist and you go to therapy. And it's like, absolutely. Like, why wouldn't I? I believe in what I do. I believe it works, and I believe it helps, and it helps me, right? And so those are the ways that we are dismantling the stigma of mental health, by normalizing that people of color go to therapy, that people of color, you know, benefit from examining some of the things that are going on in their families and their family structures that maybe not working for them, right? But this can be, things are just hard to talk about. It's like your family may not be open, but if we want to address stigma, we all have to do it together, and we all have to bring it out, and like literally bring the trapitos al sol would be the solution. It's like you bring out your dirty laundry, and then, you know, you talk about what you're doing to get it clean, not necessarily about what the, you know, everything that's going on is, because we want to have boundaries, but we definitely could benefit as an entire society to talk about how we are struggling in certain areas and what we're doing to feel better about the areas we're struggling.
Thank you, Adriana. I see we also have another question. What advice would you give to an individual who has low self-esteem and lack of confidence?
You know, so lack of self-esteem and self-confidence, a lot of the times I like to talk about the voice inside, and like whose voice is that you hear when you're doing the put downs to yourself, right? And a lot of the ways that self-esteem comes up, it really stems from our experiences from childhood a lot of the times, and the messages that we heard about our capacity and our ability. So one place to begin would be to kind of put to notice, is this voice that is putting me down, is it mine, or is it influenced by not only the things that I have heard in my family, but things that I have heard in the media, things I have heard about from coworkers, from extended family members, right? Criticisms, gossips, things like that. All of these things are shaping the world the context in that we are existing. And so when somebody is experiencing or struggling with their self-confidence, chances are that they have a voice that is telling them that they can't do it, right? That they are not good enough. And I think even perfectionism comes to play here. Some people might not feel encouraged to try new things and to do new things because they are afraid of not doing it well. And so that can also bring our self-esteem down, right? So one of the places to begin is to identify the source, where it could be coming from, and then setting up small goals for yourself about what are some of the things that do bring you, that you feel really well doing, that you feel really capable, that you feel that you excel at, and do more of that. And then also identify areas where you could try new things, identify those new things that you could try, and then little by little start doing.
Great, thank you, Adriana. I do want to read a comment, resource that was added in by April. So I'll just, it's a little long, so I'll just read it. That way everyone's aware, and we can also reference those resources on the app. We're going into the next question. So April shared that self-care resources for people working within education, one of those includes Brightmind. Brightmind would like to offer the members of our group free access to use his meditation app for 1 year. Feel free to share this with your friends and family and coworkers. It's really important to make our self-care a #1 priority, and so there's a link there. There's also a link for another site called Liberate, and their mission is to empower Black, Indigenous, and people of color on their path to finding inner peace. It's also free. That's another resource that is available. There's also one called Sanvelo, on-demand help for stress, anxiety, and depression. Sanvelo is offering free premium access during COVID-19 crisis and free access for anyone with an EDU email address. So, keep geared towards educators, definitely. I also see that, Active Minds has a list of young adult self-care remote resources on a web page, and that's listed at the bottom there. So there are a lot of great links there to reference.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much,
everyone. Yeah.
Yeah,
also, if you have Kaiser, you have the ability to get a free membership to calm.com. And that is an app that you can access meditations, sleep stories, and different things like that. So we can share that on the resources as well. It triggered my mind thinking about that.
Yeah. I have another question. What are some practices that you implement in your work with students?
Oh man, I mean, I just love working with kids so much. And it's just like I have so many things that I love doing. Definitely mindfulness. All the kids that I work with will know that if you come into my office, you will have to do some breathing and some mindfulness. I tend to keep, when we're in person, a humidifier or in a diffuser, calm music always. And so kids nickname my office like another planet where you can come and escape. And so I start with that to say that sometimes it's not so much about the intervention being that great, but it's like the presence, right? And like the way that we become adults that show up for kids. And so the distance learning space has become just a whole new world of how do I create my Zen space that I have in person into the virtual space, right? And so so things that I always start with, every meeting with a student starts with a high and a low. What's going well? What's not going so well, right? Asking about how home is going. And then also another tool that I use that I think all us educators might be familiar with is the castle wheel, the SEL competencies. And so one of the things that we're doing this year, for as long as we are in distance learning, and even when we go in person, is that every 6 weeks we have picked one of the castle competencies. So we're starting in October working with self-awareness, and all of the activities in our drop-in groups, as well as our Google Classroom that we have, will be focused around self-awareness. And we also have, in that, we have connected the social justice standards from Teaching Tolerance. Teaching Tolerance has some social justice standards that are really beautiful and really fantastic. If you're a teacher and you want to use them for your classroom, they're great. And so we are going to be using the Teaching Tolerance standards on identity as we're working on self-awareness to bring our social justice conversation as it relates to social emotional learning and well-being. So those are kind of things that we've done. Let me see. What other practices? So practices, I would say creating a welcoming, calming space, community agreements. Community agreements, even during the space of distance learning, are upheld in everything that we do, where we respect people's pronouns. We listen to understand, not to respond. You know, so setting community agreements that make sense with the community that you're working with, and that they become consistent, and they can expect them, that whenever somebody is with you, that across the board, this is the way that you're going to feel. And so those are the ways that we've adapted to work during distance learning. And just, you know, it's been difficult. It's been a lot of new things and a lot of wheels turning of how can I transfer the magic that happens in person in this work into the online learning. And it's not perfect, but it's going well. It's going well.
Thanks, Adriana. We do have another question as well from Sal. What tips do you have to fight mental health stigma for individuals from different cultures that stigmatize or don't prioritize it?
That is a very good question. I think that it's important. You know, one of the biggest things that is a challenge when it comes to the mental health of BIPOC and queers and trans, or anybody that belongs to a minority, identity minority, is that the wellness spaces and even the therapy psychology spaces come from a white-centric lens, right? When we talk about even evidence-based practices, a lot of the practices that are called evidence-based, they're not evidence to work necessarily on people that look like us, that talk like us, that have the same experiences as us. So I would say that one of the biggest kind of perspective that I can offer is to do your work from a lens of cultural humility, where you're always kind of asking, what don't I know? And am I being invited to get to know this, right, by the person, and to initiate with this lens of curiosity, with respect, and with awareness that even when we share the same culture or the same identity with somebody, that we cannot possibly know what their experience is like because we are not them. And so leading all the parts of our work, especially when we're working with people that are different than us, and using cultural humility, not cultural competency. I personally don't like that term because I don't believe that we can ever become competent in somebody else's experience. And so this idea that I am entering every relationship not as a transaction, but as a transformation. I have an opportunity not only to transform the recipient of what I may be bringing as a professional helper, but always, always, always leaving room to know that I also gain a whole lot when I lead from a cultural humility lens, because I'm learning about who that person that is in front of me is, what their life is like, what their experience have been like. And so once you start working with that lens of cultural humility, you might realize, right, that in the United States, for example, our culture, the culture that's encouraged, is very individualistic. While a lot of people who come from immigrant families, who come from different cultures, they may lean more towards a collectivism culture, right, where they may feel more connected to one another. And that the self-care plan, like of the self, it will be even like a foreign sort of idea. Like, what do you mean that I take care of myself? Like, we take care of all of us together, right? So so really starting with the cultural humility lens, getting to know the needs of that person in you. One of the outcomes, one of the things that research says even about therapy, that the more likely that you are to get positive results from your therapy is if having a positive relationship with your therapist. It's not, so this is to say, it's not the intervention, it's not how well your lesson plan is, it's like the quality of your relationship that you're building, especially when people that are different than you, that is going to determine the outcomes, the positive outcomes for them and for you as well.
Thanks, and I have a question just kind of following up on, you know, this therapy aspect. You know, there are a lot of individuals that perhaps have, you know, never really considered therapy, or maybe have perceived it in a different way. Like, what would you tell people, whether it's you're introducing it to a youth or to an adult, how, you know, what to expect when they go to a therapy session? So
each therapist is different. So there's also kind of, I want to preface that, right? That I'm going to say some things that may not be true across the board because every therapist is different. But the things that you can expect is therapists sometimes can be covered by your insurance, but not always, right? So that will determine maybe the type of provider that you would go see. Some therapists that are open to insurance, for example, they might have only a limited amount of sessions that they can see you because your insurance might only approve a certain amount. So for people who may want to use their insurance to access therapy, you might want to find out from your provider once you start working with them, how many sessions will we be working together? Because it could be that you are not as comfortable knowing that you're going to open up your heart and the things that are going on with you if you're only going to be able to meet with this person 3 times. Some insurances only allow something like 3 times, right? So it's really important to kind of find out what type of provider you're going to be seeing. Are you going to be using your insurance, or you're going to see somebody in private practice who accepts private pay? Once you call to a therapist that interests you, that you might want to connect, a lot of us offer what is called a consultation. And I would say that, as the patient receiving a service, that it is like an interview, right? Like, it's not only about whether or not I can help you professionally with the knowledge that I have, but also, are we a good match, right? Like, sometimes personality, values are not a good match. So feel free to ask your therapist about how do they work with people that are experiencing the presenting problem that you're bringing. And also, if your therapist doesn't has a different identity, whether it's racial, sexual orientation, gender than you, that you ask the question about what is it like for them to work with somebody that's different, right? Even sometimes being able-bodied, sometimes being a person with a larger body working, right? If you're going to be a person with a larger body going to a thin therapist, will you feel comfortable talking to them about body issues, about food issues, right? So anything that you're bringing up that's really unique to your experience, like I want to encourage you to feel free to talk about it with your therapist to see what kind of response you will get. And that if it's not a good match and if it doesn't align with the things that you're looking for, so that will be at the beginning. Then once you're working with somebody, some therapists create treatment plans, and they'll say, the goal would be that this is going to happen in the time that we're together. Some other therapists are more open-ended, and we just kind of work with what is showing up for you in your life and kind of go with the dynamics, examining, how things are going at work, how things are going with your family, how they mesh together, because ultimately is how you show up in all these spaces, right? So ask a lot of questions about their style, about how they work with people that are different, or they work with people that have the problem or the situation that you're bringing forward. And I guess that's also what kind of reminds me to say that people that go to therapy not only go to therapy when they have problems. People who are doing well in life but might feel like, well, I don't know what to do. Like, I graduated college, I did this, I did that, I've accomplished everything that I had in my to-do list, and now what? That is also like an excellent reason to go to therapy. So part of the stigma, of fighting the stigma, is that not only that you can't seek help only when you're not doing well, but also when you're doing well and you want to elevate yourself to like a different level and kind of find out like the deep roots that you're not able to make that movement. That is a fantastic time to go to therapy too.
Thank you, Adriana. I also do want to ask, you mentioned a little bit earlier in the Q&A that during your sessions with the kids, you do, you practice mindfulness and also talk about their pronouns. I know that's a new topic for a lot of youth. How do you bring that up and discuss it even with folks who have possibly never heard of that before? How do you encourage them to abide by those and share their what they identify with freely?
Absolutely. Just like anything, representation matters, right? So when you walk into my office, and in my virtual office, you walk in and I have posters, Black Lives Matter, you have rainbows, you have trans flags, you have invitations for your pronouns. I have posters about immigration, right? This is a welcoming space. So my physical space is that way. My virtual space, I have a Google site that we use as well as a Google Classroom, right? So it starts with, are you a welcoming person? Are you a person that even if you don't know what to do with pronouns, what to do with racial issues, but are you willing to hold the space? Because a lot of the times our students are not looking for us to give them the solution. They're just looking for places where they can feel safe and where they can feel seen for who they are. So when we're talking about pronouns, and this is like a whole another training that we can do on that, but kind of like in a basic sort of container is that pronouns are the way that folks, they identify to the world for others to identify them, right? So right now we could have somebody, for example, using pronouns like they, them, and a lot of people find it troublesome to refer to a singular person as they, them, because we're used to in common language using they, them as a plural, right? A pronoun. But when we start talking about pronouns that stem outside from the he and the she, we're opening up the space for people who might be gender nonconforming, who may be trans, who may just not align with the binary, right? And that's like the work that when you read my bio, I had said that my work is intersectional, and I explore how the gender binary, how living in this world that categorizes women and men in this very clean boxes really can be harmful to people that don't fit within the boxes. And one of the ways LGBTQ youth and LGBTQ people have some of the highest rates of suicide, of homelessness. And so the one thing that you can do to prevent suicide, we usually talk about suicide prevention as giving a number to a hotline. Using correct pronouns is suicide prevention, because somebody will be feeling seen, somebody will be feeling heard, right? So regardless of kind of where you are personally, for if you want to do what's right for students and create that welcoming space using the preferred pronouns. When I'm in person, I also wear a lanyard, and I have pins, and my lanyard has my pronouns. And I have it like in this very specific place that I know when youth are scanning my pronouns. And again, kind of like my posters, I have Black Lives Matter, rainbows, I have my plant pin and all of that. And so kids scan it, I kind of have gotten used to that, and then I'll introduce myself with my pronouns almost always, so that they know that if they want to use their preferred pronouns or whatever pronouns they have, that it's safe to use them with me.
And I do want to just let everyone know, if there are any final questions, please continue to put them in the Zoom chat or the Whova chat. And I also just want to put it out there again, if there's any other things that you wanted to elaborate on, or really I know there's a lot of takeaway messages from the discussion today, but if there's just something else that you want to
also my water bottle. Oh, let me see if I can see it. If you can see my water bottle, is my announcement too of who I am. I have my little water bottle with everything, and I carry this with me. And so, right, so all these nonverbal ways, like I use very creative nonverbal ways where like I'm like mindful that I like have my rainbow showing, or I'm mindful of this, right, when I'm drinking water. Like even in the virtual spaces, like kids and families notice these things. My pronouns are in my Zoom name for that purpose, even though I identify as she, her, ella. A person who might use different pronouns, when they see that I am comfortable using my pronouns, they will be comfortable to use their pronouns, so like nonverbals. Let me see. I mean, I feel that we've covered a lot today. The biggest takeaway is like, find time to take care of your mental health. Do something good for yourself today and every day. It's not about the spa days and the going for a 13-mile run that is going to make the difference. What's going to make the difference is the little ways that you show up for yourself every day, and that you show up for others every day. So don't discount the fact that you might have 3 minutes to self-care today, and another day you may have an hour. Take those 3 minutes and do something, you know, take care of yourself.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Adriana. I'm not seeing any more questions come through, so we are a little early. I know we started the Q&A a little bit early too, so we definitely had, you know, well over half an hour of really rich question and answer. But we'd really like to thank you on behalf of the Health Education Council.
My pleasure.
And everyone who's on the call, and, you know, also those that joined throughout this discussion. We also want to inform all summit attendees that you're able to continue the thread if there are other questions that come up throughout, you know, after you start, you know, your dinner or tomorrow in the next few days.
And I'll be checking and interacting as well. So if anything else comes up, like I will interact as well.
Yeah, and, you know, we'll make sure to let Adriana know if there is a question that comes up. That way we can get it answered. We want to encourage you to also check out the other boards, you know, post questions to other speakers. Look at the agenda. We still have, we're still halfway through our summit. We still have another great presentation tomorrow and some more lined up for next week as well. But right after this, at 5, we will be just having just an informal meetup to really talk about parent engagement strategies. And that's going to be hosted by our HEC staff. We'd love for any folks to join if they're interested, and you can access that by going on the community tab and then under meetups, and that should pop up there, and we'll be able to see each other and just have an open discussion as well. But I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you all on our next session. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate all of you being here and doing something for yourself today.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening.
You too.
Bye.